At a private country club event, my wealthy father-in-law pulled me aside, his smile cold. "Your family needs money, don't they?" he whispered, handing me a check for $1 million. My heart pounded as he brushed a finger along my shoulder. "Take this. And one night with me. No one ever has to know." My stomach turned as I stared at the check, more money than I had ever seen. But just as he leaned in, a loud voice cut through the silence. "Actually, I think everyone will know." I turned and saw the last person he ever expected, holding a camera. I never thought my life would turn into something straight out of a bad soap opera. But here I am, sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling, trying to process how everything went to hell in a matter of weeks. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I married into a wealthy family that never really liked me. They tolerated me because Sophia, my wife, loved me, and because, on paper, I was a good man. I wasn't from their world. I didn't grow up with summer homes and country clubs. I worked through college, paid off my own loans, and built a decent, honest life for myself. But in their eyes I was still less. Sophia's father, Richard Alden, was a powerful man. Old money. The kind of rich where people hang on his every word and call him, sir, like he's some kind of king. He wasn't warm. He wasn't cruel. He was just there, looming over every family gathering with his expensive cigars and polished shoes, watching everything like he was calculating something. I should have seen the warning signs. The way he watched me too closely when I spoke. The times he touched my shoulder just a second too long. The comments that seemed innocent but left me unsettled. Sophia never noticed. Or maybe she didn't want to. And then came the night. The night my entire world changed. It was an event at the country club, one of those painfully extravagant things where everyone sipped wine that cost more than my rent and gossiped about things that didn't matter. I hated these events, but I went because Sophia asked me to. Because it mattered to her. I had just stepped outside for some air when I heard him behind me. "Your family needs money, don't they?" I turned. Richard was standing there, drink in hand, watching me. I laughed it off. "I think everyone needs money." He smiled. Not a friendly smile. A calculated smile. The kind that made my stomach tighten. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a check. I felt my throat close when I saw the amount. $1 million. I actually froze. Then he leaned in slightly, voice dropping into something smooth. Almost amused. "And one night with me." I couldn't move. I felt his hand on my shoulder. Just a brush, a slight touch. My skin crawled. "No one ever has to know," he murmured. I wanted to say something. Wanted to shove the check back into his hand and tell him to go to hell. But my body wouldn't work. My brain was still catching up to the fact that my father-in-law had just propositioned me like this was some kind of business transaction. And then a voice cut through the air. "Actually, I think everyone will know." I turned. My heart stopped. Sophia was standing there, phone in her hand. She had been recording. Richard's face didn't change at first. It was like his brain needed an extra second to process the fact that he had been caught. Then the color drained from his face so fast I thought he might pass out. Sophia's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "I knew you were disgusting," she said. "But this?" She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. The quiet, sharp tone was worse. It cut through everything. A few heads turned. Conversations inside faltered. Whispers started before anyone even knew what was happening. Richard tried to fix it. He stepped forward, forcing a laugh that didn't sound real. "Now wait a minute. There's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding." Sophia held up her phone. "I have you on video." More people were watching now. Eyes darting between them. Between me. Richard turned to me, expression unreadable. "Tell her. This was just..." I took a step back. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. That was enough. Sophia turned and walked away. And just like that, the whispers turned into something else. Something sharper. A rumor forming in real time. I knew Richard Alden was done for. Maybe not legally, money could make a lot of things disappear. But his reputation? The thing he valued most? That was already crumbling. And I thought that was the worst of it. But I was so wrong. The drive home was dead silent. Sophia's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her breathing was steady, but I could see the tension in her jaw, the way she blinked too fast like she was holding something back. The video was still on her phone. I saw her lock the screen with shaking fingers before tossing it into the cup holder like it burned her. I should have said something. Anything. But what the hell was I supposed to say? "Sorry your dad tried to buy me for a night?" We pulled into the driveway. The Alden estate was massive, the kind of house that looked ripped straight out of a magazine. But as we sat there, headlights illuminating the garage door, it felt like a prison. Sophia finally spoke, voice low. Did you ever get a feeling about him? I swallowed. Yeah. She nodded, eyes still fixed on the windshield. I thought I was paranoid. A short, bitter laugh. God, I was stupid. I turned to her, finally finding my voice. You weren't stupid, Sophia. You didn't. The ringing cut me off. Her phone. She didn't even look at it before answering. Hello? Silence. Then her face twisted into something unreadable. Mom. I exhaled. Of course. The conversation was short. Mostly her mother's voice, sharp and controlled, bleeding through the speaker. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard enough. Sophia's mouth tightened. No, I'm not deleting it. More sharp words. Sophia flinched like she'd been slapped. I leaned in. What is she saying? She ignored me. I don't care. He's a predator. I have proof. Then, just like that, she pulled the phone away from her ear and hung up. She stared at the dashboard, chest rising and falling. What did she say? I asked again. Sophia let out a shaky breath. She told me to be careful. I frowned. That's it. She shook her head. She said I don't understand how dangerous this could be. Something cold ran down my spine. Sophia turned to me, eyes searching mine. What if she's right? I wanted to say she wasn't. That Richard was nothing but an old, pathetic man who had finally screwed himself over. But my gut told me something else. Sophia's mother didn't say you don't understand what this will do to our family. She said you don't understand how dangerous this could be. There was a difference. A big one. Sophia didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. I heard her pacing in the hallway around 2 a.m. Quiet, careful steps, like she was trying not to wake me. I got up anyway. She was in the office, laptop open, face lit up by the screen. Sophia? She jumped. Slammed the laptop shut. I blinked. What the hell are you doing? Her hands shook as she rubbed her temples. I don't know. I frowned. What were you looking at? She hesitated. Then, after a long pause, she slid the laptop toward me. The screen still showed a list of files. Emails. Bank statements. A name stood out immediately, Richard Alden. I inhaled sharply. Where did you get these? Her voice was barely a whisper. His office computer. I stared at her. You hacked your dad's computer? She nodded. Slowly. I had a feeling. Before tonight. She swallowed hard. I just didn't think I'd actually find something. I clicked the first email. It took less than 10 seconds to realize what we were looking at. Richard had been paying other men for years. Some of them took the money. Some didn't. Some were barely legal. And some. My stomach turned. Some had signed NDAs. Large sums of money wired to nameless accounts. Settlement agreements. Hush money. This wasn't just one disgusting offer. This was a pattern. I looked up at Sophia. She was staring at the screen, fingers curled into her sleeves. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I rubbed my face. Jesus Christ. She turned to me. Do we go to the police? I wanted to say yes. I really did. But then I remembered her mother's voice on the phone. You don't understand how dangerous this could be. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I was afraid. The next morning, Sophia was gone. I woke up to an empty bed, my heart immediately hammering in my chest. I called her name. No answer. I checked my phone. No messages. Then I saw it, her laptop, sitting open on the desk. The files were gone. The emails, the bank statements, everything we had found the night before, wiped clean. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my keys and tore out of the driveway so fast my tires screeched. I knew where she was. The Alden estate was quiet when I got there. Too quiet. I pushed through the front door without knocking, my mind racing. The place was massive, but I knew where to go. The study. Richard's office. And then I heard them. Sophia's voice, low, tense. Her mother's, calm and sharp, like a blade. And Richard. Laughing. I stopped outside the office door. It was cracked open just enough for me to see inside. Sophia was standing across from her father, arms crossed. Her mother sat in one of the leather chairs, sipping coffee like this was just another Tuesday. And Richard? He looked relaxed. Like he had already won. Do you think you're the first? He said smoothly. Do you think you're the first person to threaten me, Sophia? She didn't flinch. This isn't a threat. Richard chuckled. Oh, sweetheart. Of course it is. But you don't understand how the world works. Then he reached into his desk, pulled out a file. Sophia's entire body tensed. I took a look at your little research project, he said, tossing the folder onto the desk. And I have to say, I'm disappointed. This is amateur work. Sloppy. You really thought you could find something I didn't want you to find? I couldn't see her face, but I saw her hands. Clenched. Shaking. Her mother sighed, setting down her cup. Sophia, we're not fighting you. We're protecting you. Sophia scoffed. By covering up crimes? Her mother gave her a tired look. By keeping you from making a mistake. Richard leaned back. You will delete the video. Silence. And, he continued, you will forget about whatever little files you thought you had. Sophia shook her head. And if I don't? Richard's smile faded. Then we'll have to discuss some uncomfortable truths. He pulled out another file. This one was thicker. He flipped it open casually, like he was going through a menu at dinner. Your little indiscretion in Milan, he mused, flipping through papers. The affair. The cover-up. The money we paid to make sure no one ever knew. Sophia's face drained of color. I felt like the floor had just dropped under me. Affair? My brain tried to catch up, tried to make sense of what I had just heard. Richard barely glanced up. Oh? He doesn't know? His eyes flicked to the door. Come in, son. No point in hiding. I couldn't move. Sophia turned to the door, eyes wide. And in that second I knew it was true. She had cheated. Before I could react, Richard's voice cut through the silence again, smooth and deadly. We own you, Sophia. You've spent your whole life living off my money, and now you think you can defy me? If you go through with this, you won't just ruin me. You'll ruin yourself. You'll lose everything. Her mother sighed again, standing. And him, she added, gesturing toward the door. You'll lose him, too. Sophia looked at me. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I saw fear in her eyes. I stepped into the office, my legs moving before my brain could catch up. The air felt thick, heavy, like the walls themselves were waiting for the explosion. Sophia's face was pale, her lips slightly parted like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Because there was nothing to say. Richard watched me with the same cold amusement he always had, like he had played this game 100 times and always won. Go ahead, he said, closing the folder. Ask her. Sophia flinched. I swallowed, my throat dry. Is it true? She didn't answer. That was all I needed. My hands curled into fists. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Jesus Christ. I was going to tell you. She whispered. I scoffed. When? After you burned your family to the ground? Or were you hoping your dad would never find out? Her eyes glistened. It was one time. It meant nothing. I shook my head. That's a hell of a thing to say while your father is blackmailing you with it. Richard chuckled. You're upset. I get it. He gestured at me with his glass. But take a breath. Let's be rational. I turned on him so fast his smirk faltered. Rational? I took a step closer. You offered me $1 million for a night with you. And when that didn't work, you threw your own daughter under the bus to save yourself. His smirk came back. And yet here you are, proving my point. You don't belong in our world. You let feelings dictate your choices. He leaned back. That's why you'll always be beneath us. I exhaled sharply, my hands shaking from rage. This man, this disgusting man, thought he could say whatever he wanted and get away with it. And maybe he could. Sophia's mother finally stood, brushing invisible lint from her dress. This is a waste of time. Sophia, darling, just give them the video and let's all move on. Sophia was silent. Her mother's voice hardened. Now. I looked at Sophia. Don't. She sucked in a shaky breath, eyes darting between me and her parents. Then she reached into her purse. Pulled out her phone. And my stomach dropped. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then, without a word, she tapped her screen, deleted the video, and set the phone down on the desk. I let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. Wow. She couldn't look at me. Richard smiled. Smart girl. Something inside me snapped. I lunged across the desk and grabbed him by the collar. The whiskey glass crashed to the floor. His eyes widened, not in fear, but shock. Like no one had ever dared touch him before. What are you doing? Sophia gasped. I tightened my grip. I should kill you, I said, voice low, shaking. Richard let out a breathless chuckle. That's the thing about men like me, he murmured. We don't die. We just... I punched him. His chair tipped back, crashing onto the floor. His wife screamed. Sophia yanked at my arm, But I wasn't done. I grabbed him again, dragging him up by his collar. You think you're untouchable? I spat. You're just a pathetic old man hiding behind money. He coughed, spitting out blood, but the smirk was still there. Sue me, he rasped. I shoved him back, chest heaving. Sophia was staring at me in horror. What the hell is wrong with you? I let out a breath. Looked at her. Really looked at her. And I realized she wasn't on my side. Her eyes weren't filled with anger toward her father. They were filled with something else. Something worse. Pity. I shook my head slowly. You never planned on exposing him, did you? She hesitated. Sophia. My voice cracked. You were never going to do it. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't know what to do. Her mother's voice was like ice. She made the only choice she could. I turned back to Richard. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and let out a soft, bloody laugh. You were never going to win this, son. Sophia whispered my name. Please. Let's just go home. I stepped back, shaking my head. Home? My voice was hollow. We don't have a home. Her face crumbled. And that's when it hit me. This was never going to end any other way. She was never going to choose me. Not really. Because no matter how much she hated them, she was one of them. I let out a breath and turned for the door. Sophia's voice cracked. Please. Just talk to me. I stopped. For just a second. Then I walked out. I packed my things that night. Sophia came home late. I could hear her crying in the other room, but I didn't go to her. I couldn't. She had made her choice. And I had made mine. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. No note. No messages. And that was fine. Because there was nothing left to say. It's been a few months. I got my own place. Small. Nothing fancy. But it's mine. I never heard from Richard again. Not directly. But I know he handled it. Cleaned up his mess. Paid off the right people. He always did. As for Sophia? She reached out once. A text. I'm sorry. That was it. I didn't respond. Some betrayals don't get fixed. Some wounds don't heal. And some people, they were never meant to be saved.